Personally, I think one of the biggest ways that we betray ourselves is by continuing to live as someone that we have already outgrown. And I mean this across all aspects of our life. Career, the way that you love, the way that you build friendships, the way that you let people treat you, the way that you move through your own life. If you're new here, my name is Tricia. I model, I'm a writer, I'm a creator, and my biggest life mission is to live life as the fullest version of myself, full stop. I'm actually getting ready for dinner right now, but I just had this thought all day and I just needed to talk to you about it, so here we are. I have been doing something lately that I had not done before. And it's before I decide on how I feel about a situation, whether it be a connection, a dynamic, a choice, what have you. I have been asking myself directly how I feel. Crazy. It feels simple, but it's not. Because for most of my life, I thought I was doing that, but I just was not. I was constantly tracking everyone else. If you've seen my past videos, you know I've been to therapy, you know I dealt with a lot of abandonment wounds, fear of rejection, judgment, and with that comes with me being hyper aware of everyone around me. And so when I thought I was checking in with myself, what I was really doing is checking with where everyone else was at and kind of tracking their movements, tracking their emotions, tracking how they're showing up and using that as a reference point for how I felt within the dynamic rather than checking with myself first and then using how they're showing up as secondary to the experience that I'm having with them or to the experience I'm having in general with whatever I'm talking about. And so in the midst of me tracking everyone else, I just stopped tracking myself entirely, which doesn't make sense because last time I checked, this is my life and somehow I was no longer the center of it. And the reason this came to my attention was because recently someone asked me how I felt about the way that they were showing up in our connection. And if I'm being super honest, it caught me off guard. Like I didn't even process what they asked me until after we got off the phone. I was like, how do I feel about how they're showing up in our connection? And when they asked me that, it wasn't that I didn't have an answer. That's not why I was kind of like shocked by it. It was because I didn't realize how much I appreciated being asked that question. And more importantly, it made me realize that I didn't have a habit of asking myself that question first. And I feel like that's a really crazy blind spot to have when you're living your own life. Like it just feels crazy to me. For a long time, I felt like I was such an active participant in my relationships, and processing this made me realize that I may have been a lot more passive than I thought. And the thing is, it's not the craziest thing or most shocking thing for me to say about myself because again, like pre-therapy, pre-all the things I've kind of gone through and have spent so many years working through. Like I was in therapy for 2-3 years. I cut off dating and was abstinent for 4. I was kind of isolated and not really open to making the types of connections I was making prior to all of this happened. Just because I feel like I was shifting and changing so much that it didn't really make sense. I didn't really know who I was or how I wanted to show up in connection or show up in certain situations. And in hindsight, the relationships that I made still during that process ended up becoming super muddled and messy because I'm still trying to figure out kind of who I am and what I am. And so that disconnect just didn't make for sustainable relationships. It just didn't. And I'm aware of that. So it is what it is. But this whole thought and that one single question that I was asked, it made me ask myself if I had really been a participant in my relationships and my connections and the life I've been living. And I don't feel that I really have. I feel like I've been a lot more passive. I've been very much, if you know me, you know I've been very much more go with the flow and like we'll just see how things happen and see how things turn out and let people show the way that they're going to show up and then move based on that. But then that makes me more of a reactor in my life versus being an initiator, and I don't like that. I don't like moving as if I have no say in how my life turns out because I don't believe that. And so for a long time I believed I was an active participant in my relationships. I was present, I was engaged, I was paying attention. And I'm not gonna say that I wasn't because I definitely was doing those things, but I believe in hindsight I was paying attention to the wrong things. I noticed moments that didn't sit right, that didn't feel right. I noticed lack of consideration. I would notice inconsistencies. I'm noticing all these things, but I'm still like, I understand why they're doing it. I know why this is happening. I know why this situation didn't come into my life the way it did. I know. And so as I'm telling myself maybe this thing just needs more time, looking back, I'm realizing I wasn't really trying to protect the relationship or the dynamic or the situation. I was trying to protect the possibility of it. Because if I acknowledge what I was really feeling, whatever felt off, whatever I wasn't sure about, whatever just felt weird to me, if I actually acknowledged it, I'd be forced to make a decision on it, and I wasn't ready to do that. If I'm being super honest, I just wasn't. So I kept going with the flow, and that's just how I moved through life, and honestly, it's how I still move through life in a lot of different situations. And it wasn't until my whole parish journey that I've been very aware that I just didn't want to direct my life that way anymore. And the thing about going with the flow and not honoring your intuition or honoring that gut feeling that you're feeling that something's off, you're not supposed to be here, that choices you're making don't feel aligned with you, is that months later, that same thing that you noticed week 1 or 2, it becomes undeniable. It goes from being something that was just feeling a little off to exploding into an ending that feels like you've been stabbed in the chest, that feels so abrupt and so harsh and so intense, all because I didn't want to deal with it in the beginning. Silly. Silly, silly, silly. So I would feel hurt. I would feel betrayed. I would think, oh, they should have been more honest. They should have been more clear on what they wanted. Everything on what they should have done. And while I believe that people should be honest and clear and direct on what their intentions are, I've started asking myself a different question. And that is, where did I leave myself? Because the truth is, I noticed everything that happened along the way. Remember, I was paying attention to everything outside of myself. I was hyper aware of what every step and every emotion and every little minute thing was happening. I was very aware of it. Aware enough to know that something in me didn't feel settled, but I continued on in this path, thinking that was the right way to go about things, and it just wasn't. What I needed to realize is that I didn't need to learn how to read other people better. I needed to learn how to stop reading past myself. And I realized that this applies beyond relationships. It's the relationship that you have with yourself, that I have with myself, creative decisions, and the choices I make about how I spend my time and my energy and my money. I get so focused on how things are unfolding externally. Is this becoming everything that I've envisioned ever? That I've truly forget to check in with what's actually happening with me. And I'm not gonna lie, I definitely have ADHD, so it definitely plays a part in it, but I can be better at reminding myself to check in with me first before I move forward in anything, because I've been trying to figure out why there's sometimes a disconnect between how I'm moving and what I'm feeling like. And that doesn't happen as often as it used to happen, which is why I think that question again, that triggered this whole thing, was like, oh, this is really nice, because I've been trying to be more intentional about making sure the two align before taking a step forward. And I have been doing that, but this is just the journey of how we got here. I hope you're following me. But in trying to figure out why this disconnect is happening, I keep coming back to the same thing. I spent all my time or all my energy tracking things outside of me instead of tracking things that are happening here and here. So now, before I assess anything externally, I am trying to make it a point to check in with myself first. How do I actually feel about the way this is unfolding? Do I feel valued? Do I feel cared for? Do I feel safe? Do I feel considered? Or am I just simply overriding all those things because I just want something to work? I want something to play out the way that I expected it to play out. And those questions are honestly changing to everything. They're changing the way I look at everything right now. And I think it's so necessary and so important, especially taking the big leaps that I tend to take in my life. I should probably be leading with this mindset versus let's just see what happens and ending up in really shitty situations. Something I'm recognizing, every time I override myself, I move farther away from me. And every time that I honor myself, I return. And crazily enough, the more consistently that I return to myself before doing anything, the more seamless life seems to flow for me, and the less complicated everything else becomes. Not because people start suddenly showing up perfectly, not because I suddenly start showing up perfectly, but because I'm no longer asking people or situations outside of me to decide and determine what I tolerate and what I accept in my own life. I already know because I asked myself first. What I think is important is to not let previous versions of me that I may be more comfortable with, that I may be more accustomed to, determine how I live my life now. If I don't want past versions of me to dictate how I move through my life. I feel like her existence was necessary and important and valuable for the time that she was here, but we've evolved since then. And I don't want it to feel like I'm completely dismissing past me and all that she's gone through, because it's not what it is. I have so much love and gratitude and grace for her because she's been through a lot and she's held a lot and learned a lot as well. And it's because of the growth and work that she's done that I'm able to stand here today and even reflect on this the way that I am. But I think there's a difference between honoring who you were and continuing to live as her. And I don't want to continue to live as her because we're just in different spaces right now, and that's okay. I think it's important for us to recognize that, check in with ourselves first before we check in with anything outside of ourselves to see how we feel. And once you've done that, once you've tapped into that and grounded within that feeling of you, then decide how to move forward. Then decide if you want to get into that relationship. Then decide if you like that person. Then decide if you want to leave your career or stay in your career. You get me? So that's what I've been thinking about lately. And I feel like I got all my thoughts out. We don't really know if we did because it's me. But I am thankful for the person who asked me that question because it's important. And I do need to check in with myself more frequently on how I feel in the situation, first and foremost. Because like I said in the beginning, if my life mission is to live my life as the fullest version of myself, I should probably know what I'm feeling. Hello. So yeah, thanks for chatting with me for a little bit. I do have to go to dinner now, so that's what I'm gonna go do. But I love you guys and I'll talk to you later. Bye.